That clock is behind.
Yeah, that clock is
Yeah, you can't go by that.
we still need to get that
It's
one fixed.
6:02 now. I don't know, we need to buy a new clock.
I'm gonna flip just in case.
One second. PowerPoint. There it is.
All right, are we,
Call the meeting on. Call to order the meeting for the assessment plan presentation. Welcome, everyone. I'm sure you're going to, for the few people who are just in to learn about the plan, they haven't gotten here yet, evidently. But, but we are glad to see everyone this evening, and we'll get started. Any questions from committee members? Okay, comments? Okay, Adam, it's over to
right.
you.
well, thank you for coming on the second Monday night in a row for a board function. I really appreciate you taking your time out. So tonight, we're going to be presenting the long-term patron services assessment that we've been working on for several months. By we, I mean myself. The lead was Schmidt Associates, and I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves from Schmidt, HBM, and team, starting with Lisa.
Hello, I'm Lisa Gompertz. I'm a project manager and principal with Schmidt Associates.
Renee Downing, I'm with HBM Architects. I lead our master planning team.
I'm Kevin Kennedy with HBM Architects. I'm a principal and project manager.
I'm Tammy Bella Robinson, the CEO of Engaging Solutions, and we're leading the community engagement.
Joe Jarson, Client Liaison with Schmidt Associates.
Belinda Drake, pronoun she, her, community engagement leader with Engaging Solutions.
And we also had staff from Powers & Sons, JQOL, and Fairbot Group to help with the team. So I'm going to do a quick introduction. Maybe? There we go. Quick introduction to give you kind of the overall scope of the project and where we started, where we're headed. So really what we wanted to do was incorporate the mission and vision of the library, which you see on the screen there, and which feeds into the strategic plan of the library. Combine that with the technical facility condition assessment, which is the nuts and bolts of the equipment and assets that need to be maintained, combined with what has been colloquially referred to as the facility master plan, but is long name is the 2024 Long-Term Patron Services Assessment. So it is beyond facilities. It includes operations. It includes finance. It's broader scope than just facilities because it's focusing on what the library is and currently providing our patrons as far as services and what we can and what they are looking for in the future. So once you put all of those together, you get that patron experience, which is what our ultimate goal is. So if you see things that are a little bit beyond what you would think relate to buildings, that's why. All right, so I'm just gonna go over real quick our agenda. We have our executive summary, the facility assessment, that's the nuts and bolts, community engagement, and the patron services evaluation. So in the emails that I sent out, this is a lot of content. We've timed it for about 45 minutes, which I'm sure I've already blown. But if you could, please let us get through the content because there is a lot. And then we've allotted over an hour for Q&A, and so we'll be happy to discuss anything and everything. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
Okay. I'm going to sit over there and let the experts present, and then I'll be back for the discussion.
All right, thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Lisa.
So we're going to take the next 40 to 45 minutes to present this basically in 4 chapters. The first being the executive summary, which is really just going to give you sort of an overview of the recommendations. And then we're going to talk about 3 different components that really built that recommendation. The facility assessment, that nuts and bolts, the condition of the facilities, the community engagement and stakeholder engagement component of it, and then the patron services evaluation. So we had a very diverse team of 6 firms that were specifically selected for their scope of work, and we've just done introductions. But your goal of XBE participation was 27%, and I'm happy to say this team, as it sits today, is 65% XBE. So that's pretty exciting. So there were several goals that we identified with your leadership team that we wanted to make sure that we were addressing as part of this assessment. One was that we wanted to create a long-term 20-year plan for you, a roadmap essentially, with a patron services focus. We wanted to really look at how your libraries are being used now, both personal, in person, and virtually, and how can we expand that. We wanted to understand what your library patrons were wanting in terms of services, programming from their branches, and the overall library system. We also looked at the benefits of regional versus neighborhood-based branches. We looked at that from an operational standpoint, where there might be some efficiencies. And looking at how you might be able to invest capital cost to help reduce your overall operational costs. Some of those are sustainability type things, et cetera. And our hope is that you'll be able to use this as a starting point for your strategic plan. A lot of this data, I think, hopefully will be a good spring point for that. And then our goal was to get this wrapped up by the end of February so that you would have that information for bond discussions starting in April and May. So in terms of schedule, this was about a 7.5-month project, and we identified it into 4 separate phases. The first being sort of kicking it off and getting the project set up. That's where we identified those goals, we set up the schedule, talked about a communication strategy. The longest part of our project was really the research and data gathering. We got data on your facilities, how they're operating, what condition they're in. We gathered information from your staff. We did that through surveys. We did that through talking and touring with them. We also did community outreach, and again, that was in person and surveys. All that came together for us to then move into phase 3 to develop options and start to look at prioritizing those based on all the data we collected, and then ultimately the reporting, which you have sitting in front of you. So I think it's important to always look at why we do master planning. This is a summary of your 2014 master plan in terms of how much of it was completed, and over 85% of the projects that were identified have been completed to date. There's 2 that you'll see noted, and it's hard to see on here, Decatur and West Indianapolis, that have not been completed yet. They were later in the 2014 master plan and should be coming up for work, and you'll see in our report, those are 2 of the first branches that we've identified for work. But I just think it's important sometimes to look back to understand why we do these. We also wanted to provide a brief summary, kind of a comparison to your 2014 study, what was included in this one. So we did include deferred maintenance costs. We did not just look at the large capital projects, so you're going to see that there's some maintenance specific projects in addition to the large renovations and new construction. We looked at some of your non-staff expenses to help prioritize. Those can start to signal things like maybe the equipment isn't operating quite as efficiently as we would like it to. We did a detailed technology assessment. We looked at all the devices that are deployed in your branches and where there might be a need for some more. We also did an ADA assessment. So those last 3 components were not part of your 2014 study. From a benchmarking standpoint, we looked at 10 different peer library institutions, and Renee is going to look at that in terms of what that data might start to show. That was about twice as many as what was in your 2014 study. And then in terms of data analysis, the 2014 looked at collection circulation. There was quite a bit more data that was evaluated: door counts, service point engagements, reading programs, the spatial breakdowns, et cetera. From a stakeholder engagement standpoint, your previous study did not have stakeholder engagement. So this was sort of a new component that allowed us to gather another level of data. From a staff standpoint, 228 responses. In addition to that, we walked every branch with your branch managers and allowed them to give us not only feedback during those interviews, but then we also gave them an opportunity to review the report and provide written data as well if we missed anything, and we took that into account. And then from a patron standpoint, over 360 responses in 7 public meetings. Then from a cost and sequencing standpoint, we not only prioritized your major projects, but you'll also see that projects that are a little bit further out in the sequence also have some maintenance projects that will happen in the first 5 years. This particular study also included cost factors like inflation, maintenance cost, and soft cost factors as well. And then from a recommendation standpoint, you'll see quite a bit of information in there in terms of demographics, the observations that we received while we were walking it, and what we received from the branch managers. And then not only do you get like a square footage recommendation, but there's actual specific layout recommendations and observations that we had for each branch. So just to orient you a little bit to the recommendation, this is the high-level kind of summary. There's some different components to it. The first 2 lines up there, the year built or renovated, is really just to give some context in terms of how old the buildings are. The 2014 master plan, we thought it was important to have it on here just as a reference in terms of what its recommendation was. And then in many cases, we explored 1 to 2 options for every one of the branches. And then based on the data, we were able to explore and have conversations with your leadership team to pick the recommendation that we thought was best. So then the bottom 4 shows what the recommendation is and the timeline. So there's 4 different priority levels, 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, and then further out, priority 4, 16 to 20. You will see most of the projects that are in priorities 3 and 4 category have a maintenance project that's in priority 1. And that's to address some of the more urgent issues that were identified during the facility condition assessment. And so these next 3 or 4 slides are just walking through each one of your branches and showing that information. So kind of a quick overview. Now behind that, and I know you can't read this, but it is in your book there in front of you, there's very detailed information in terms of cost. What you'll see up in the top is just a graphic square that shows the different projects. Kind of that orange color in the top recommends a maintenance project, and each of the colors means a different thing. That dark black line down the middle to the left of that are the projects that you've completed over the last 7 years. And we wanted to have that there for some context to then explore what we're recommending moving forward. This next slide summarizes all that information. So over the last 7 years, you have spent about $68 million on your facilities, and that equates to roughly $9.8 million per year. What we're recommending in the next 7 years is roughly $241 million worth of spend. Keep in mind, there's certainly inflation built into these numbers. And that equates to about $34 million per year. We have built in about 1.4% per quarter. We're being a little bit more conservative based on the way our economy has been over the last several years. And then if you take that out over the next 17 years, which is kind of the duration of the study that we identified, we're about $470 million or $27 million per year. So that's sort of the overview or the executive summary. And then I wanted to just start with what I'm calling chapter 1 here in terms of the data collection, and that's the facility sides of things. So you guys had already had a facility condition assessment that was done back in February. We also deployed a team of architects and engineers to go out and look at the facilities as well, just to get familiar with the data, both from a visual standpoint so that we could identify it with the report that you already had. We did add to that a little bit. There were some additional things that our team found as well. Those things got prioritized into a high, medium, or low category. And what we found is there were certain branches, that 12 that you see identified, had the highest need in terms of condition. And there were sort of some natural breakpoints. There were about 4 of them that had over $600 per square foot worth of maintenance needs. And then the next 7 to 8 there had over $425. We have all of them, but these were the ones that sort of rose to the top. And some of those priority items really kind of worked out in terms of 4 categories. So from the architectural standpoint, these were more maintenance types items. ADA accessibility were some of the key things. Under mechanical and plumbing, large equipment needs, chillers, boilers, those types of things that had just reached end of life. On the electrical side of things, some life safety, some fire alarm systems that really needed to be replaced. Older electrical equipment, again, just end of life. And then some opportunities for efficiencies where you can replace some older lighting with LED lighting. And then on the site side of things, drainage, landscaping, wayfinding, and then opportunities again for maybe adding some electric charging stations where we have seen those deployed, like at West Perry, they seem to be used by your patron base. So some opportunities there to provide some additional services. So we also did a little bit of a deep dive into your operational costs, and we kind of split them between staff and non-staff expenses. And we didn't spend a lot of time looking at the staff expenses other than to identify maybe where there's some efficiencies between what I'm going to call regional or neighborhood or local type branches. But really where we focused was more in the non-staff expenses. And again, those things can start to indicate that maybe there's some systems that aren't operating quite as efficiently as they could, and maybe should have some more analysis. And the top 4 that came up were Glendale, Irvington, Garfield, and West Indianapolis. And those, Glendale's obviously wrapping up, but the other 3 are targeted for projects in the first 3 years of our recommendation. We also did a technology assessment. We looked at different infrastructure, so security systems like card readers and video surveillance, audio-visual systems, if you had a community room, what type of capabilities did you have, intercom systems, and then even looked at things like wireless access points for coverage across the square footage, and even number of PCs for your patrons. And again, this is one that you're probably going to want to take a little bit more of a deeper dive in, but we identified the ones in the dark orange or red, as ones that maybe should be evaluated first. They seem to be in the lower end of the devices deployed and could possibly benefit from some additional infrastructure. Oh, I just hit the wrong button. Sorry. I knew I'd be the one to do it, even with the tape. Easy enough, thank you. So ADA assessment was another one that we looked at, and most every branch had 1 or 2 things at least that certainly could be addressed to make your facilities more accessible to your patrons. And most of the things probably could be addressed in a major renovation or a capital project. There are some things, though, that we would prioritize to kind of the areas that folks want to be a little bit more independent. So restroom accessibility and just general accessibility to the building. Those are ones where people need to be pretty independent. And so those are the ones we would prioritize probably to do in the next few years if possible. If you were to take all of your ADA projects and do them in kind of a summer or a year-long project, it would be about a $400,000 to $450,000 project to address all the needs that we identified. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Engaging Solutions to do their portion.
My best not to turn it black. Thank you. Good evening, once again. My name is Tammy Butler Robinson, and I am with Engaging Solutions, and we are excited to lead the community engagement goals and strategies. And I'm Belinda Drake again, pronoun she, her, community engagement leader with Engaging Solutions. Super excited to be here with you guys, and thanks for having community engagement be part of this process. All right, we will jump right in to be sensitive to time. As it relates to community engagement goals and strategies for this particular project, we really wanted to take some time to look at making sure that we had deep community connections, being able to define that modern library, identifying the challenges and possibilities that exist, as well as being able to strengthen community integration to take place. It was really anchored in being able to cultivate collaborative partnerships that would take place, and then promoting inclusivity and addressing the impact of change, because things don't always stay the same, they evolve, and making sure that the library is able to evolve with the changes. Being able to envision future services and spaces, and whether that is due to accessibility, whether it deals with for wheelchairs or otherwise, we want to be able to expand that and be able to facilitate inclusive growth to be able to occur.
As we started this process, it was very important for us to be very focused. There were over 362 surveys that were completed, and we wanted to make sure that we were facilitating both in-person and virtual meetings and creating spaces where people would organically want to share and engage, and that there was diversity of thought that was taking place, and that people could really freely express their thoughts and experiences, and being able to also leverage technology. One of the pivots that we had to make as an organization is that our project kicked off in October of that year, and quickly the holidays began to approach, and we had to make sure that we kept people engaged during that period of time to meet the timeline for the project. And so there were 7 events between October and January. And while the holidays impacted those, we were still really able to meet with a lot of individuals in a one-on-one basis and having conversations with them, being able to gauge what the library meant to them and how it in many ways changed their trajectory. And it was exciting to be able to hear those stories to be able to take place. For us, the strategy is really to facilitate both in-person and virtual meetings. And then once again, as we mentioned, leveraging that technology. And so it's to be able to integrate and interact, to learn, and then establish those connections, and that the library becomes that pillar in the community.
All right, and so as you can see here on this slide, it presents pretty much a summary of the meetings, the events, and details pertaining to each public meeting and community engagement opportunity. As Tammy mentioned, a lot of the public meetings started to take place in October, and then we did decide to make a pivot after the first couple of meetings to just meet community where they are. We thought that that was a great idea. We did see an increase in participation after making that pivot, and continue to, again, engage community where they were, both in person and virtually, and then also created space towards the end of the project to re-engage with some of the library staff for a virtual meeting as well. And here on this slide, you will see a summary of the feedback from the meetings. There are a few areas that we do want to lift up that we did hear from everyone that participated either in the survey and or participated in one of the public meetings. One being programming. Lots of community feedback emphasizing the need for cultural events and festivals that cater to families of all ages and backgrounds. We thought that that was a huge opportunity to lift up. There was also particular interest in technology and training classes for community as well, alongside recognition of constraints posed by limited budgets and resources that I think everyone here already understands. Another area that we wanted to lift up that we heard a lot of pertaining to were the services offered by the libraries. The community expressed a need for improved services, specifically the implementation of technologies such as screen readers, text-to-speech software, and then also to make the library's resources more accessible, again, to everyone, which I think was covered in some of the facility assessments as well. Then, of course, facilities is another area that we wanted to lift up in the feedback that we received. And this feedback indicates a desire for a library's physical space just to be more comfortable and welcoming, and that starts in the parking lot, as you may already know. And then additionally, there's a call for establishment of dedicated adult learning just to enhance the educational opportunities. Again, back to the workforce development piece for community members. And then, of course, another area that we want to lift up is community engagement itself. The community wants the library to strengthen its outreach and engagement strategies. So I think that it was a good job to have community engagement be a part of the process this time. and more specifically, with the focus on collaboration with organizations to reach the underserved populations, and to provide educators with access, again, to the educational software and applications. All right, and here on this slide, it just represents the survey indicating that we had about 362 total surveys completed as of January 19th. The mechanism for which we received or we deployed the survey was through SurveyMonkey. We had 338 electronic surveys and then 24 paper surveys as well. One thing that I do want to lift up here is that the library did establish a goal of 150 surveys, and we are proud to say that we surpassed that goal and collected over 350 surveys here as well. And here we start to just dive a little bit deeper into the survey results. And of course, this survey does begin to break down the demographic data from the survey, highlighting that majority of the respondents identified as female. There was a wide range of participants with significant representation in that over 60 age group as well, which we can over 60 as well, and the data also suggests diverse patrons, which can inform targeted service and program development as you continue to just dive deeper into the results. Comparatively, the library data skews older than the general population demographics, and Marion County did want to lift that up, indicating a potential opportunity to increase engagement with the younger demographics. So again, opportunity to engage the millennials and the Gen Z as well. And then, of course, we also wanted to bring your attention to the survey results as it relates to race and ethnicity. And this slide clearly displays demographic details, again, of the survey of participants, which includes race, ethnicity, and education level. Majority of the respondents identified as white with significant representation from the Black and African American community. And we do want to also briefly touch on the fact that responses from other ethnic groups, particularly the Hispanic and Latino population, were lower than we had hoped for. We also acknowledge this gap and have developed strategies to increase that engagement with those communities in particular. And I also do want to lift up the fact that there was a percentage of folks who did not choose to identify. I think that that's worth lifting up as well. And Tammy, back to you.
We also did a patron survey, and when we looked at the patron survey results, one of the questions was, how can the library actively engage with local cultural and artistic communities to celebrate diversity? And there were several ways that people were able to engage by either hosting cultural festivals and events that could take place, creating a diverse collection of books and resources, collaborating with local artists and exhibitors, and then establishing partnerships with local cultural organizations, and then also organizing with diversity-themed book clubs and discussion groups. And so these were ways that were elevated through the survey results for engagement and to celebrate diversity. We also looked at what role can the library play in promoting intergenerational and diverse connections and activities. And when we looked at that, you saw that organizing family-friendly cultural events rose to the top, as well as offering workshops on bridging generational gaps and understanding diversity. In addition to that, the question was also presented, how can the library use emerging technologies to enhance accessibility for patrons with disabilities, which was something that we heard quite a bit through the dialogue that was taking place. And so implementing screen readers and text-to-speech software rose to the top, as well as developing a library app with accessibility readers such as voice commands taking place, and then installing wheelchair accessible computer stations as well as ergonomic equipment as well. Also, it was about addressing the digital divide within our community. So hosting technology training came up in several of the discussions that took place, as well as classes for all ages, and then offering tech support as well. And so it really came down to fostering a sense of belonging and community ownership among patrons. And so that people felt comfortable and welcome in the physical space, as well as hosting community-led events and workshops to take place. And then also ways to enhance support for those lifelong learners with personal development, whether it's creating a dedicated adult learning center with the library or hosting workshops in career development and resume writing. In one of the sessions that we attended with the East 38th Street Library, there was a gentleman that came in to the library, and he did not know we were having a public meeting that was taking place at that time. And he sat down, stayed, and as we started having conversations, he said, I really just came to get information for expungements for some of my friends, but I've learned a lot more about what the library actually has to offer. And so it lets us know that the more that we're able to engage and share resources, understand what the needs of people in the community are, then they also have personal development that is able to occur. And then it also helps to, with the perception or misconceptions about libraries and why they exist. And so libraries, you know, it's been stated libraries are not relevant in the digital age, or libraries are outdated, but these can be oftentimes perceptions or misconceptions. And so the resources to really help the library also to staff better, to serve the patrons as well as their diverse needs, you know, really being able to outreach and have community engagement strategies that are being deployed was also what we found through the survey results. Additionally, through the results, it also talked about the key challenges or obstacles faced by the library staff, limiting budget and resources, and then staffing shortages and workload, as well as balancing diverse roles and responsibilities. And then also, are there specific initiatives or resources your organization needs from the library to better serve the community? And there are specific initiatives or resources include assistance in reaching underserved populations, as well as access to the library's physical space for events. And so oftentimes people are looking for places to gather and don't always have the resources to be able to go to places because of what that financial burden might be. And so being able to really leverage the library for physical spaces for events and ways for people to connect and advance community. The other patron results here on question 11, in what ways can the library align its goals with broader government strategies? And so it's really about promoting government services and resources to the community, and then collaborating with government agencies on community programs. And then how can the library provide resources and services that support educators in addressing the unique challenges of the 21st century classroom, supporting educators. They talked about providing access to educational software and apps, and then offering professional development opportunities for teachers, and then hosting workshops on technology and integration in the classroom as well. Also, as a result of the patron survey, there were open-ended comments that were also shared with the team as well. As community engagement and visibility, they thought was very important in being connected to the communities in which they're in. Book renewals and collection, quiet study environment, facility upgrades and safety, programs and events, and then they had concerns around the content. Was the content diverse? And then general suggestions just for the overall improvement. We have some additional outreach strategy, and I'll turn it over to Belinda to capture that.
All right, thank you, Tammy. And so, as we've shared earlier in our part of the presentation, we did not receive as much connectivity and engagement with the Hispanic and Latinx community that we had hoped for. But the good thing is that we've already put together a short-term community engagement plan to specifically work with that demographic here in Marion County that we've already deployed, starting with some additional outreach, our survey being translated to Spanish as well. And then just over the next 30 days, just that continued engagement with this specific population. One area that in closing, we would like to just lift up and say that as you guys continue to think about your next steps, your strategic plan, and what the future of community engagement looks like for the library, one thing to keep in mind is that building trust and connecting with community is not a linear situation. It requires ongoing, long-term community engagement and outreach, which ultimately leads to trust and folks utilizing the wonderful services that the library have to offer. And so thank you for your time, and that's all we have.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Renee Downing with HBM Architects. And we'll move on to the last section of this presentation, which is the patron services evaluation. So kind of working hand in hand with the public input gathered by Engaging Solutions, let's start talking a little bit about the staff feedback that we received. So this is just showing the responses we received to staff survey. 228 responses. The numbers in dark green signify that more than 50% of full-time staff responded to the survey. As Lisa mentioned, we did also meet with the branch managers as we walked through the buildings during the initial data gathering phase. And this survey was available from September through the end of January, so that we could really leave it open to staff to continue to respond and then also do some follow-up Zoom meetings with branch managers as needed. All right. Let's jump next into the data summary section. So here we took a look at how the buildings are being used. So backing up the staff survey, where we asked some anecdotal questions from staff about how the buildings are utilized throughout the course of the day, what materials and types of technology patrons are requesting or bringing their own. Really just to gauge, how space is allocated in the building and if it meets how the buildings are used and how that's shifted over the last few years post-pandemic. So here we're looking at door counts over the last few years, and you can see InfoZone is really doing the best in terms of door counts, but they do have the advantage of being in the Children's Museum. Following them, Garfield Park and Lawrence. And there are a number of categories in which you'll see the Garfield Park location excelling in terms of use, further making a case for the building being undersized for the community that it serves. Additionally, we also looked at physical collection use per square foot, again looking at how the spaces are utilized in the building. And here, again, we're seeing highest use out of Lawrence, Nora, and Southport. And that probably is not much of a surprise to any of you. And then we also looked at programs offered. Keeping in mind that Garfield Park does not have its own community room, they're still doing pretty well, right behind the highest of Warren, East 38th Street, and West Indy. And then service point engagement. This is an interesting category and metric where staff self-report how they engage with patrons throughout the course of the day and what those services look like. even though it is imperfect data, we still found this to be very telling of what patrons are coming to staff for help with, and helps to paint a picture of staffing in the branches. And then we also looked at summer reading program participation, just as an indicator of how much the patrons are engaged with programming offered at the library that really promotes expanded reading opportunities in a more of a social, collaborative way. And here, Lawrence, Franklin, and Southport are seeing the highest participation in this program, and that does align with Lawrence and Southport also seeing the highest levels of circulation of physical collections as well. In addition to these metrics, we did also look at the impact of digital collections and also space allocation. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the diagrams of how spaces are broken down within your buildings. The next category we want to touch on is benchmarking and peer comparison data. As Lisa mentioned, we compared IndyPL with 10 other peer library systems across the country. These were selected based on the service area population that they serve, similar number of facilities, but there is quite a distinction between operating revenue and operating expenditures as we look at this comparison. And then we kind of, to simplify a little bit of what's going on in this section, we'll just talk a little bit about where Indy ranks amongst its peers. And although they are a little bit towards the bottom in terms of revenue, the number of librarian staff and professional staff is really excellent in this library system. And it's clear that it's making a difference in how patrons come to your buildings and access resources and that expertise. And then we look at collection use, circulation, and technology use. You can see that you're towards the top in terms of physical collections, PC use, and number one in Wi-Fi sessions. So as some patrons are still relying on public computers, they're definitely more so using your Wi-Fi. One of the things I do want to mention that when we do benchmarking, we see a lot of library systems either go way up in digital collection use or stay towards the bottom. And a lot of this has to do with the cost of digital resources compared to print resources. And it's just how budgets are allocated based on patron needs at the time and where you see your population shifting between physical collection use and digital accessibility. And in a lot of areas, there's not really consistent access to Wi-Fi outside of libraries and library sites. So we're not seeing as much necessary use of digital collections. The next category, programs and services. So as the team from Engaging Solutions mentioned, there is an interest in having expanded programming in the library system. You're about in the middle of the pack of number of programs offered, but program attendance, the number is a little lower. And this could be for a number of reasons. One is many of your branches have fairly small community meeting rooms. There's not really the opportunity for overflow space. So if you want to host a larger program, you're really stuck with the space that you have and not have the ability to hold it in the main space of the library with mobile furniture, mobile displays, things that can be moved out of the way for larger events. Another reason for this could be the same as why your number 11 in terms of card holders is that library cards are not required for attending programs, access to technology, and really just for checking out materials. So you're seeing a lot more use than the number of card holders would indicate in this metric. Part of the reporting process did present the draft of the report to the branch managers for feedback. Here we did hear back from everyone, and as Lisa mentioned, many of the comments we'd heard have been incorporated into the report, and some of these really helped us take it a little further in terms of how the buildings are used regularly. One example is with the college branch, that we thought the quiet reading room was really just, not working well as a quiet study space, but we didn't know that really small groups are using that as a, primary meeting space when the larger meeting room may be too large or it's already booked. So we went back in and modified the layout for that branch to include a small group meeting space for those people who rely on that quiet meeting room for that. And as Lisa mentioned, we do have some prioritized building renovation and replacement projects. So these are, as she mentioned, the ones that from the 2014 master plan that were not yet addressed, West Indy and Decatur. In addition to that, Garfield Park, which is really an area of need, and the Hallville branch, which does have a lot of inefficiencies in the way the building's laid out and the amount of how the square footage is used. Then the Irvington branch as well is also very dated on the interior, similar to Decatur. And the Library Services Center, the building we're in right now. As the backbone that supports library operations, we feel that there is a lot that could be done to improve functionality in this building and how that spreads system-wide from this point. Another topic we examined was the use of smart lockers and creating library outposts. This is something we see a lot of library systems do for a number of reasons. One could be to have an access point when projects are under construction. So as Nora and Pike might be closed for renovation, there could be an outpost with smart lockers and a couple parking spots for access to Wi-Fi in that community while those buildings are closed. Even though other branches nearby are available, this helps people who like to walk to the library, may not have reliable access to transportation, somehow rely on that location specifically to still be able to access library materials by placing holds, drop off materials, and also access Wi-Fi. In other communities where you might feel like there are gaps in library services, we typically see these outposts placed in partnership with community rec centers or retail areas, places where people are already going, but access to library materials would really benefit their daily lives and how they access information. All right, let's dive into a little bit about the building layouts. So let's start with West Indy. This is the first project that we're proposing in order for renovation. So on the left, you see the existing layout. Pretty simple. Based on what we'd heard from staff, branch managers, and patrons, we're aware that there are some inefficiencies in the space, that the existing footprint seems undersized for the community. There's a lack of staff space. The restrooms are in need of repair. There are a number of maintenance items that go along with this building. Other concerns are visibility throughout the space and that there's a lack of study rooms. So there are a lot of social services visits at this location without anywhere for people to really meet in private or semi-private, as we want to maintain staff visibility to these rooms. So the concept A is a full renovation of the building within the current footprint. So we're just looking at ways to provide the added features that are needed in this building without adding square footage. And then concept B would be a small renovation to the south. So this would take up the rest of the space, as you can see on the right, on the aerial map that the library owns. Now, this type of expansion would rely on partnership with Mary Rigg for continued access to the parking lot to the left of the library building, because this would occupy the parking spaces that are on the library property. The other option would be to consider an alternate location. However, there really aren't locations available in this immediate community, and pedestrian access is high at this location. So the location itself is really important to the building being used and accessible. The next building on our list is Library Services Center. And here we have a really nicely sized lot with room for expanded parking if the building were to expand as well. So here, what we're looking at is really focusing on the first floor in terms of improving functionality, flow, and more space for CMSA departments, in addition to an expanded vehicle garage, so that you'd be able to have a staging area and house your library vehicles in a secure way. Additionally, this would be relocating the Friends book sale adjacent to Outreach Services, which does manage the book sale. And then also providing archival storage and additional space for CMSA departments, which currently are really cramped and not all of them have space in this building, which creates inefficiencies in workflow. The other consideration is expansion of your AMH system. As you're doing more with IPS, the system is undersized for the amount of variations that it needs to run, creating challenging situations for staff as they go through operating the system to move the materials through the building. This would just mostly leave the second floor as it is, with the exception of reducing the size of the staff lounge on this floor and relocating the HR department, so they have a little bit more of a private area in the corner. The next building is the Irvington branch, and here we're looking at a renovation of the existing. So on the left, you see the existing again with these fractured staff areas in red, a very large circulation desk, and kind of a minimal teen area, but just the flow is very outdated. The community room is small and undersized. The study room is a makeshift former cafe, and you have a large space behind the circulation desk that is not really visible to staff. So what we're looking at is really creating new flow, new adjacencies, so that as you enter the building, you still see staff, but you also see more new materials, you see an openness to the space, and you see more accessibility. Now, on the top right, the aerial shows the site for the Irvington branch. As you can see, it's pretty confined, and there is some space for expansion inside the L in the top right corner. However, there is also an interest in having access to green space and promoting outdoor programming through the children's area leading out to this outdoor space. So as you move forward, as you think about these buildings, it's, to also think about the priorities for the community and for the users of this branch, which is more important, to add this square footage or to provide this outdoor space, and how that ties into programming that can be offered here. All right, the next building is the Hawville branch. And here we are also looking at focus on renovation. Similar to West Indy, the Hawville community is very pedestrian heavy at this location. So we want to maintain the location of the library building. We feel like there are a lot of opportunities with just reconfiguring the interior of this building in order to improve efficiencies. One of the main things you'll see in this building, again, is the layout of the staff area here. So this branch has the highest level of staff to public space at 30% in your system. What we're seeing in your new buildings is 20% staff to public space. So we think that if we can get it closer to what you're doing in your new buildings with better efficiencies, still providing storage, that it would open up more space for public use. And here we're also looking at redefining the location of the children's area so that it's more in view from staff. Right now it's kind of behind the staff desk as you go into that back corner. Providing improved access to the seating and study areas that are currently tucked in the back, and the layouts really more conducive to individual focus study as opposed to small group meetings. And then also providing a sound barrier for the children's area. As anyone who's been in Hawville knows, if you cough or sneeze, it's like the walls are shaking. That echo is very powerful. But also, we're looking at other concepts for how staff can provide oversight through the building. So right now, they're in a consolidated location towards the front, but we feel that there are opportunities to separate the reference from the circ staff to provide better visual oversight, connectivity to public computers, but also to then be more available to patrons and kind of away from that big barrier desk into a more accessible situation in the middle of the floor. So here your reference staff are closer to children's and still monitoring public computers. One of the things we heard from the branch manager here was concern over the size of the area devoted to public computer stations possibly not being large enough. So this is another example of where we incorporated what we heard from the branch managers in the draft review in updating the layout for the proposed improvements. All right, Garfield Park. So here we have a really interesting situation where the library site is split between the parking lot and where the building is located. So you can see on the right, we looked at two different sizes for building expansion based on the available lot. The smaller yellow square is about 1,000 square feet, and then the larger light blue square is 3,000 square feet. And this would really max out what you can do on the site. So again, the existing's on the left, and then on the right, option A, the 1,000 square foot expansion, is really focused on adding a community room and storage with some minor updates to the existing space. And then option B, which is the larger 3,000 square foot expansion, really does a lot more to update the space, update adjacencies and flow. However, it still is undersized for the amount of use this building gets. So even with the 3,000 square foot addition, you would have 0.22 square feet per capita at this library location. Many state standards are closer, anywhere from 0.5 to 1 square foot per capita. So even with maxing out your site, this building might still be too small. And so our proposal is really for a new building. However, we know that this location is important to the community, so this is an area where we also look at that push and pull of what else is available, how can the services be increased here. So you will find in the report a series of these baseline adjacency diagrams. So as you think about new buildings that might not have a site yet, we provided some suggested layouts based on best practices in the industry. So this is an example of the 20,000 to 25,000 square foot adjacency diagram. So as you get further into this process and identify potential sites for new buildings, whether they're 15,000 square feet, 30,000 square feet, there are some suggested adjacency diagrams in the report that can be applied to those sites. And then the last branch we want to talk about is Decatur. As Lisa mentioned, this was one of the buildings identified in the 2014 master plan. And here, there is definitely room on the site for expansion, decently sized parking lot. However, the building form itself creates a lot of inefficiencies. Again, staff are fragmented throughout the building. There's a lack of study space. The children's area is undersized for current use. The community room is undersized for current use. So what we're looking at is about a total of 3,300 square feet of expansion in this proposed concept. And again, reconfiguring the space to maintain the openness, but also to increase the areas that are used the most and provide the features that are needed, which are not currently available at this location. All right. And then we'll leave it open for questions.
All right, so that was a lot of information in a very short amount of time. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and if I get stumped, I'm going to rely on my team of experts who has helped me out through this entire process. So we started out with what was the overview, the point of the project. We went through some of the nuts and bolts of the assessment, went through community engagement, and then overall, how can we provide the services that our patrons are looking for. So I will open it up to the board, to the committee, since this is a committee meeting, for any questions.
May I make a comment first?
Yes, you may.
Just want to thank you, Adam, for sending this way ahead of time. We had to wade through it and spend time through it, but also thank you for saying that this is beyond facilities, that this really is patron services assessment, because it gets to just that kind of thinking. So thank you for framing it differently from just about the facilities themselves.
Thank you. I will defer to Dr. Palacio on that, having a conversation with him. He had some questions of why are certain things in there? Like, why are we looking at IT? Why are we looking at collections? And he made me realize that the way that I was communicating had narrowed it down. And so it helped me understand that I need to, from the beginning, ensure that everybody understands it was a broad assessment. So thank you to him as well.
Absolutely. I do have a question. I have several, but I wanted to thank the planning that has gone into this, because it's clearly showing areas that are much needed. When I go to visit West Indy, I know it needs help badly. And when I just was over at 38th Street and said, oh, wow, this is so wonderful. The librarians there have been doing such an incredible job of keeping it aesthetically pleasing, but there is a need. But Hallville, Garfield, West Indianapolis, and Decatur stand out, and you pulled it out of the hat. It's so clear that it's much needed. The fact that, and Eugene knows this, I keep turning back to Hallville over and over again, and the need for better visual, the incorporation of thinking about staff to public space. Can you say some more about how you're thinking through that staff to public space utilization? That would be very helpful.
Yeah, Renee, she's the one with the ratios.
Sure.
more
I'm
than-
going to borrow this for a second. So in addition to your library system, we do have a lot of master planning work nationally as well. And this is a trend that we're not just seeing in your new buildings, but nationally amongst branch libraries as well. And you'll notice that we really just looked at space allocations across the branches, because Central is its own animal and operates totally differently as main libraries should from their branches. So, let's see. So as we look, pages 304 and 305 of the report have a series of pie charts that break down just a nice visual of how those spaces are allocated in your branches. And you'll start to see trends emerge between some of the older branches like Hawville or College Avenue, where there are those staff inefficiencies. You see the larger service points, and they may not be in the best location. And that's where we start to look at, you know, the overall layout of the building. So similar to Hawville, for College Avenue, we looked at a complete overhaul of the entire building, not just the space within that library area, but the entry, the community room, the whole thing. And once you look at it holistically, you start to see opportunities emerge for consolidating how staff are operating and how they're providing public services in the building. So the workroom does have its own requirements, number of offices, shelving, carts area, you know, all of those things, book drops. But from when those buildings were constructed and laid out originally, a lot has changed, and especially in opportunities for workflow efficiencies, but also what happens at the service desk and how staff operate between circulation and reference and children's staff. And so one of the things we're doing, knowing that there are a lot of staff limitations at the buildings, is how do we reorganize the space and reposition those service points into those key areas. And as we talked with branch managers, one of the things we talked about were fixed versus mobile service desks. So in some of these buildings that may not be huge, like Hawville, which is around 16,000 square feet, you know, during the course of most of the day, those two service points are probably sufficient. But if you see an influx of teens or of youth coming into the building after school or on weekends, then you have the opportunity to bolster that with a mobile service point as well. But the goal is to get staff out on the public floor and to be more available and accessible so that you're not, patrons of all ages feel comfortable approaching the service desk. Does that help at all?
Oh, absolutely. I was at 38th Street, and I went to college, and the whole idea of the positioning of the service desk when you come in. At college, you come in through the entry, then you come right in, and that positioning, it does not allow you to see different things that are happening around different places. Same thing with 38th Street.
Yep.
You can't see it. Hallville, same thing. You can't see, and if you're talking about the children behind the area over there, you can't see what's going on there. So the suggestions that you've made here make such good sense, because you can't tell what's going on when you can't see it.
Thank you so much.
The mobile service staff, mobile service units, we have it at Michigan, right? Was it at Michigan? I think it was
Is that where,
one.
I know there's a smaller service desk at Michigan. I can't
In
remember.
this, kind of in a central area.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Is that part of the recommendation then, to move into it? Because I didn't see that in here.
In Michigan, we did not recommend relocating it because we felt like there was good coverage based on where the desks are. We recommended moving that desk a little deeper into the space so that it had better visibility to the study rooms. Because those are kind of, depending on how the way the collection is organized, that if someone's sitting at the desk, they can't quite see the people in the study rooms unless they're standing. So our suggestion was to put soft seating where some of those shelves are, so that as you move the desk a little further back, you have better visibility to the study rooms.
Thank you. That's very helpful to understand the staff to public space and getting better efficiencies. Much appreciated.
Absolutely.
Questions, guys?
Do you
Anything?
have anything? Well, I guess my question would be, thank y'all for this report. It was a lot of information. So my question is to Adam, where are we going to start? What's your plan?
Well, the schedule's right in front of you. It was on page 334 in the draft. It was that very wide graphic that Lisa showed earlier on, with the thick black line showing year one for 2025. I believe West Indy is among the first. So that's one of them. LSC is among the first as well. As they mentioned, LSC really is the backbone of the behind the scenes. Every single circulation goes through here. We support the entire shared system through here, and right at the moment, unfortunately, Deb Lambert isn't here, but I think we're up to 4 distinct sorting profiles on the sorter right now. And so that means some materials go through 4 times. It's a lot of wear and tear on the materials. It's a lot of wear and tear on the machine. So expanding the building to allow an expansion of the sorting machine, increases of efficiency there. And it's also having the book sale be its own entity. And the other thing also that I'm not sure if you remember the graphic, there was a series of yellow dashes through the LSC graphic. So, excuse me, books come in, they get sorted, they go out, and then they have to cut across diagonally if they're going to the book sale or something along those lines. And this would make that flow of books stay basically on one side of the building. So there'd be no cutting across, increase of efficiency, stuff like that. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
There it is.
And with that, the LSC expansion, I saw a piece in there about archival storage. Is that going to be in conjunction with the special collections room at Central, or how is that going to work?
No, I don't think that would be in conjunction with special collections. I think that's mostly archival, such as floor plans and other project-associated documents like that. Because right at the moment, we do have that type of storage that is commingled with outreach and the book sale storage. There is a mental line in that room that the two sides don't cross, but it would be its own discrete area.
I had
One
another question. Oh, no, please go ahead, Richard.
That's one of the recommendation pertaining to ADA was to take care of all of that in one project, like over a summer, for a cost, from $450,000 to $500,000. That was the estimate, somewhere in there. Are we giving that serious thought, or are we looking at these new sites and going to patch in as we go, or just what's your thinking on that?
If I remember the list, the vast majority of suggestions for ADA are not in the new buildings. There are some tweaks that need to be made, but 90% or so are in the older buildings that haven't been recently built or renovated. I'm looking at it as an option for the next series of bond issuances. We have that discussion coming up later this month as a standalone project. It would be great for our patrons to get everything done, say within the next 12 to 18 months. That way we know our buildings are fully accessible to ADA. And actually, we've been looking to expand beyond just that baseline accessibility level. There's a new certification out of San Diego, I believe, about accessibility. It's based off of the LEED certification program for accessibility, so it's ADA plus. So we're looking at that to inform and possibly incorporate that into our standards. But yeah, the 450,000, we're looking at that being a single project across the system.
I was looking at some of the same ADA. You were getting ready to go? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a couple of questions. One was about the bathrooms and the ADA. I thought that seemed doable and accessible, so that would be something. And then my other question, and I heard you allude to, is what is our capacity? On my way over, I heard the cost per year for capital projects. What, did it double? I mean, from what we have been doing to what's recommended here. What's our capacity in terms of bonding and the ability to keep up with what's the recommended new schedule for
That's a great
capital
question.
projects? Or do you know yet?
I'm going to take the get out of jail free card and say I don't know because specifically rather, our CFO, Lolita Campbell, and I have a meeting with Baker Tilly, which is our advisory firm for debt obligations. And they have been given this draft, specifically the slide that's up, just as a very high level, and they've been given that long-term plan by year as just a heads up for this is the conversation that we're going to have. And of course, that doesn't include IT projects, that doesn't include collections, that doesn't include a few other things. So this is just the facilities portion of funding. So we have that meeting scheduled over the next sometime in the next few weeks. I know it's later in March. And so I can give you a more specific answer, here after that meeting.
Okay. And so I was a little off. It's really like 3.5 times more than it's been. The other thing is that I am so excited about this because I love to have this. I'm so excited about this too because this information is coinciding with our strategic planning. And I would love to hear your thoughts about what do you think, I mean, there are clearly takeaways and you've shown the priority recommendations, but what are your thoughts about how this will feed and support the process that we're undertaking to do our strategic plan?
My hope is that it will provide substantial information towards it. As we've mentioned, this is really focused on what services we can give our patrons. And even though it was in my department, operational services now, formerly facilities, it's really focused on how can we create the built environment. We need to know the services aspect to be able to create that built environment that allows facilitation of those services. So my goal is for this to be an iterative project. The strategic plan is every 3 to 5 years.
Right.
This was a 10-year update from the 2014. I don't want to wait that long anymore. This was a heavy lift. The team did a wonderful job, but it was a lot of information over 7 months. I want it to be iterative. I want it to occur 6 to 9 months. I want it to start 6 to 9 months before every strategic plan iteration comes, so that way the board has a couple of months of the data. And our strategic planning and assessment officer also has that as well.
And one more question.
Go on.
Which is, there was significant comments about IT and data, and I often talk to Greg about us being the information superhighway. These plans, do they incorporate significant IT and AV capabilities so that we can start to up our game in those areas?
So with the current renovations, our IT is actually highly capable. It handles every single Wi-Fi session we throw at it with amazing speed.
Awesome.
It is great. There are suggestions for expansion, but those are based mostly on expansion of the building, hence the expansion of usage. As far as AV goes, are you talking about the capability for, like, currently with the two-way and, you know, full up and down streaming and everything?
Well, yes, and just the, you know, there were comments about it being a community space. And so having the kind of capacity in equipment, hardware, even just to accommodate those kinds of meetings. And maybe it is perception. I mean, they talked about that as part of perceptions and misperceptions. But if our patrons don't know that we have it, then we don't have it. I mean, you know, it's not being used. So I guess that would be my question, like, are we, so I hear you talking about our internal IT, right? What's been thrown in it, but what will and how will or can we expand to answer some of those responses about technology and IT? And then to me, AV just comes along with that.
Sure. And just to let you know, I'll start from that last with the AV. AV does fall under operational services, does not fall under IT.
Okay.
And so that is my department's responsibility. It interfaces with IT, but my department's responsible for installation and purchasing and operation. So as far as AV goes, you know, the team did take a look at it, and it is sufficient for, or sometimes beyond, of what currently our patrons are asking for, or what they think they should ask for. It's a little bit of a chicken and the egg. And so we didn't go further than that because while they, the original or the baseline adjacency diagrams were given, going deeper than that would be the responsibility of the architect that we hire for the specific renovation. And so the specific AV that, you know, we're nailing down for which areas, small group rooms, community rooms, that would be part of the individual project. However, we can definitely make a note of that and take a deeper dive into that and see what our capabilities could be, rather than what they are or what our, to your point, perceived should be. But prior to that, your earlier question about IT, that is a very good question. It's kind of a marketing question of how do we let the public know that it isn't just ink on paper, right? And so, like I said, this is beyond facilities, and so a lot of this information goes to, you know, operations, IT, comms, and marketing is in there as well. So good discussions to have with Mary. I believe she's back there somewhere.
Yeah.
So that's a great question. I don't have the answer to it. I wish I did.
Well, I just want to add my gratitude to everybody else that's here. This is great work. It's a great presentation, and I'm excited to put this next to my bed and just
Light
go
reading.
through it. Yeah.
Go to sleep on it.
I had a number of questions that weren't tied to the presentation, but what was missing. I found it to be very disturbing that we had a low Latinx feedback. Latinx community is growing beyond leaps and bounds. And the fact that we'd only had an 11.1% return on a survey, I mean, that's not satisfactory. And I'm not sure where we got the 150 was supposed to be the baseline. We were told that's, we've exceeded it by 300 and something odd. The fact that we have 26 sites where communities are all around each and every site, and then we say, okay, 150 will be enough. No. And 300 and some odd surveys from all of these different communities that we have, I found that to be exceptionally problematic. And I would ask that we would really see and understand that for our growing Latino population, that we respect and regard that diversity in a way that wasn't an issue in 2014. And we kept going back to saying, 2014, 2014. Well, we're in 10 years since, and we have really made a major difference in this community. And so how have we paid attention to that? I've also found it to be a really serious issue when we think about the fact that community meetings and community events, did we have Latino translators to hold those forums? Did we go to churches, the faith community where Latinos are in large numbers? Perhaps, I don't know, but I remember one member of our facilities committee asking, are we going to the faith communities? Where else are we going, like community centers? I know that Mary Rigg serving the West Side. I know that Hallville serving the near West Side. I know Flanner House. We have community centers right there where a large number of Latinx community members serve. And so how are we not getting that kind of information that can feed very thoughtfully into the kinds of things here? That's not an attack. It is a question that I think we need to look at, and to put it off and say we're going to come back and do that, it should have been a part of the engaging all along. I want to ask one other question about it. We talk about fostering belonging and the need for lifelong learning. Every single branch is doing a tremendous amount of family engagement activities. I mean, just incredibly. So I'm wondering if it's the communications challenge that we have with the communication, with the families, because they are packing in our, from early childhood presentations at every branch to the ones that are dealing with the elders who coming in for workshops, et cetera. And the elders do come in. They're coming in large numbers. And so how are we really collecting adequate data for the range for family engagement, for our Latinx community, and even in terms of the educators? How were they surveyed? Because we said that there's a gap there for the educators. Well, the educators, our Sarah Brett, what's the name of the person who does?
Sarah Beck.
Sarah Brett has been doing a tremendous job of working with the educators, and yet that, we were told where educators' response on question 12, we have a low one, and I'm like, this is problematic because I know we have a strong relationship with the educators in this community. So I'd like to think some more about those aspects of this study, the Latinx part, the part about what we're doing with paying attention to the number of surveys, community groups that we're meeting with, and the educators that we're connecting with.
Okay. All right, I think I know what you're asking.
Maybe I can ask it a different way?
Well, I want to ensure that I'm remembering it correctly. But let's start with the Latino community. We had underrepresentation. Oh, that's.
I got it, if you want me to jump in.
I was just trying to get to the.
Last slide for community engagement.
Am I going?
Keep going around.
Oh, there we go. So 11.1% was the demographic data. That's how many people identify as Latine in Marion County. We had a 3% Hispanic or Latino response rate. And so we recognize that was lower than desired. And so we had a slide about additional outreach, specifically to the Latino community. So the strategic partners, you see La Plaza, the Hispanic Business Council, Indiana Latino Expo. And so we've got those on our list. The engagement timeline is right at the bottom there. We've got 4 weeks of additional engagement. I view this document as a living document. This is not a cast in stone. And it will be updated as recently as 6 weeks from now once we execute this and get it incorporated. So even on an annual basis, we can do community outreach to make sure that we're hitting the things that we want. Another thing that I'm not sure if I don't think we identified it exactly, but if you look at the highest education completed, we have 36% graduated college and 41% have their grad degree. So 77% of respondents have college or beyond. 77% of people in Marion County do not have a bachelor's or beyond. So we're missing people who did not graduate or go beyond college. That's another area. We have a list of things to do better for next month, next year, next iteration, and that's another one of them. And so, yeah, we had a great conversation with Drs. White and Dr. Palacio in between the DPHR and the finance committees last month, and you came in on the last part of that, and that's what really spurred this additional outreach strategy, because we recognized that it was significantly lower than desired.
But we had mentioned it way before that. We had mentioned it back in 2023, when this conversation started. And we mentioned it again in January. So the fact that you're saying, you know, yes, we did, and I agree, it's a living document. It has to be, and it's a wonderful approach to doing this work. But what I'm saying is, if we bring it up and we talk about it, and then we say we're going to do it later, there's an amount of urgency here, because just like everybody knows, this library plays a major hub in some of the communities that don't have the resources. And you know it, I know it, we all know it on the board. And so how do we act with some urgency and not see it as, okay, we're going to wait? What happened with West Indy? I'm so glad that these things are being addressed, but for us to communicate even far more effectively and to do community engagement with a kind of urgency behind it is what we need to be able to do. And that's not to say something is wrong with engaging solutions. It's to say, we brought it up, we mentioned it before, we talked about it. How do we act with urgency to support the needs of those minoritized communities that frequently get put toward the back, when we now know that they really do rely on and use the library extensively? That's what I'm asking about.
If I may, I just want to say, first and foremost, thank you for continuing to bring it up. Engaging Solutions is very passionate about reaching marginalized communities of all backgrounds. So that is always received, and we appreciate the feedback. I think around the time, I was not present for the meeting, but around the time that it was lifted up in a prior, I think, facilities meeting, I think that was around the holiday time, and we were attempting to partner with, again, community-based organizations that heavily work with the Latinx community on the west side of Indianapolis. I know we did reach out to several organizations who, just due to the holidays, they weren't able to accommodate us. Going back to our initial pivot to meet community where they are, which we found the most success. But then I would also go even further to say that we do believe in acting with a sense of urgency to address community, especially those who are usually forgotten about or underserved, which is why we decided to go ahead and start the outreach specifically to our Latinx partners and community prior to this meeting. But more specifically, towards January, I believe the library wanted us to focus more on staff. So that's where we spent most of our time in January as well. But again, pointing back to that sense of urgency, we did not wait to re-engage with our Latinx brothers and sisters. We've already started to do that prior to us even coming here to extend that outreach. And go back full circle to my closing remarks when we were up here sharing. I think it's something that we have to continue to look at and think about community engagement again as a continuum. It's an opportunity to continue that engagement beyond even this 30-day plan, right? We should always be looking for opportunity to re-engage with all populations, regardless of background. So I do appreciate the continued, I would say, directness as it relates to the Latinx community in this work, and just know that we are already implementing, but we also want to suggest the ongoing engagement with all populations. even after this project has closed.
The managers and the staff of our branches do engage nonstop with the community. They do that in ways that are incredible. It's not something that they don't do. So your point is well taken, but after seeing and interacting with so many of the staffs at the different branches, they do this. That's a part of what they do, and they are brilliant at it. Most of them have such a sense of commitment to the community that they put on events that and pay attention to the little ones, to the teenagers, to the old folks. They do it, and so it's not something that's new or in need of. It is what we might be able to build upon even further. The public service aspects of our public library are tremendous, and they do community engagement.
Absolutely.
Yeah, with that said, I want to go back to some of the survey response that you got from your surveys. Two of them were promote inclusivity and strengthening community integration. Did the respondents kind of elaborate on what they mean by promote inclusivity and strengthen community integration?
What question
What
was that?
question is that?
It was one of the responses to, I think it was probably more of like, so getting to like how to engage more with the community or community ownership or.
Question 10, specific initiatives or resources your organization needs from the library to better serve the community. Was that it?
No, it literally said promote inclusivity and strengthen community integration as like one of the responses.
Oh, it's one of the responses.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't write down which
Is
question
the
it was.
sense of belonging?
So question 10, I believe you're speaking to microphone, I'm sorry.
No. Yes.
Here.
Yeah, you got it.
There you go.
Am I repeating your question?
Yeah, so the two of the responses from the patron survey results were that patrons would like to see the library do better at promoting inclusivity and strengthening community integration. I just wanted to know if those patrons elaborated on what they meant by that and how the library can go about achieving that goal.
That's question 8.
I think one of the, in several of the discussions that took place, it was really about making sure that everybody felt that the library was a place that they could belong. And whether it was various age groups or whether it was people that were coming in because they were trying to research something because they were studying something on theology, or whether they were looking at something that had to do with science. And so that no matter what, the library was that kind of safe haven for individuals within the community and feeling like they had a place to be where they could connect and belong and be able to uplift their community at the same time.
And I think to add to that, to your point, I found the question, it was question 8, specifically more inclusivity around the LGBT community was definitely lifted up as well.
And I think when you look at,
Training,
oh, I'm sorry, does that answer?
Yes, it
Yep.
does. And so were they responding and saying that they didn't feel that the library was that place for them, or were they just saying, you know, we want it to continue to be that place, or?
Continue to be that place, and there was a recognized need for training to serve specific populations.
Okay. So, gotcha.
And just a lot of the information that was collected, particularly on the questions that you're connecting to, were a part of our patron survey, and that's how that information was collected. And so once again, this was allowing people in a very confidential way to be able to respond to the survey online, and then we were able to gather that information and do the analysis around it based on the questions that were being presented.
Great question.
Follow up. Hopefully this will catch my voice. If I can follow up, we had, Lisa, how many appendices did we have? 8?
It was 6 to 7, I think.
6 or 7 appendices with raw data. And so one of those appendices is the open-ended questions to this particular survey, also including open-ended questions to, from the staff survey. So we have all of that raw data, all of that raw information that we can then use to have our leadership team look at, have strategic planning take a look at, so we can have some words behind the numbers, so we can get a sense of how people are actually feeling rather than just, 0 to 5 type thing. And so that is available. We didn't include that. The full report would have been 1,200 pages, which is a little bit more than I can carry. So we do have that available. We just didn't include it in either the presentation or what will ultimately be the public report.
And one of the
Well-
other pieces,
Thank you. I've saved my comments almost for last. I think when we're soliciting opinions and views from the public, we got to be sure that we're not writing our conclusion before we ask the questions. And there's more than one way to do this. Of course, if you check out a book in person, you can have a brief survey of 3 or 4 questions for people to fill out. And you can organize your report in such a way that you get the in-person brevity compared to the longer survey. But I just think we need to look at a different way to approach this because we do have high circulation rates, which mean people are utilizing the library, which means that we have more opportunities to get input. And we need to look at a variety of ways to do this. I find in working with some companies over the years, they have their mind made up how their final report is going to look, and all they got to do is fill in the spaces. And they do that for all populations, and it doesn't work for all populations because some of us are a little different.
absolutely.
And some of us may not want to give an opinion, be afraid that something may come back on us. All kind of things are out there. So I think we need to get a little more creative in the future when we're soliciting input. That's one comment. My other comment is, we are in a new day. We can't piecemeal anything anymore because everything is so comprehensive. And I think all of you are right. It is hard to say, let's do ADA for 500,000 over a summer because that can't be blanket because some places we're going to close them because we're going to build a new branch. And what's the timeline between the mandate and the new facility? I mean, so it's not simple what we are attempting to do. However, I think that when you are a person with disabilities, you remember those facilities and how it made it easier for you to be served. And so it helps to do those in one swoop if you can. And even though you may be tearing that particular building down in 2 years, right now you're creating opinions and impressions. And so I'm in favor of, when we go further in this, to look at our money, look at our bonds, look at the process, check with strategic planning because it all blends together. And that's what makes this fascinating. We're not doing a facility report like you said. This is a service report based on the needs of individuals, library, et cetera. And I want to commend all of you for the work you did. I was impressed with it when I was reading it on virtually, but I had to tell Adam that I'm an old-time paper and pencil guy, and I comprehend better than paper. And so I want to commend you, Adam, and everyone for putting this together because, you have eliminated one excuse that we have. that excuse is to say, I didn't know. I don't know. Because when you know better, you should what?
Do better.
Do better. So we have an obligation, based on the work and the return you've given us, to do better. We also have an obligation to understand that we are diverse. And I am so proud of what we're trying to do to get diverse voices and provide diverse services, because the University of Florida just canceled their DEI department, fired everybody in it because they killed the budget line. This is going to happen to some other places in red states probably, but it should never happen here, should never impact the library system, because we represent the truth of the matter, and we have to be a resource for everybody. And in order to do that, we have to be considerate of everybody's opinion, and just because it's not easy to do doesn't give you an excuse not to do it.
Absolutely.
And I want to commend you, because the first time you presented to the facility committee, we were concerned about engagement, and you went back and you did more work. I can see that. I want to commend you for that. But I want you to comprehensively look at how you solicit information from various groups. And, you know, we still have a lot of people go to churches, not as many as we should have, but community center churches and other community organizations, the library depends on them for sharing their needs. And unfortunately, we're victimized by saying, you're not doing this and that, when we don't know, and we need to know. So I think, thank you for this. We are still seeking ways to know more so we can do more. And I want to give each of my committee members and, of course, my chair a chance for final questions or comments, and I'm going to put these people out of their misery after them. So, Stephen, we'll go from you across. Do you have any comments or questions?
Just one last question. How was the survey distributed online? Was that through the library website and other means?
We distributed it through Engaging Solutions. I believe the library shared it out in other community-based organizations as well.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
You want to add anything
I was
additional?
just going to say, it was an online survey that was created, and so the link was able to be distributed over and over again in several places. And then we asked organizations, just like was mentioned, to please post it to their websites as well, and to be able to share that information out also.
Thank you.
Just thinking about the surveys and the information from the community, and I'm looking at Mackenzie because I know she is working on a plan for community outreach for the strategic plan. And so there are two things that came to me. One, and I know that it is that's what Engaging Solutions does, and that's what other communities, but there is a demographic that the library doesn't serve, and we have talked about that. And how do we understand who they are and ask them what they need? And then the other thing to me is, I love that we had the demographics of our survey respondents and the demographics of our community. I would also like to see how that compares to the demographics of our current patrons, just as another sort of baseline to compare it to. And then I don't know how that works out, but I do know that we have an opportunity to do some more community surveying through our strategic plan. Not trying to throw a monkey wrench in your situation, Mackenzie, but I think it follows. And then I also want to bring up the fact that our CEO last Monday when we met has started talking about collecting information from our patrons when they're on site, right? So I think we do have the opportunity for continuous, perpetual collection of information
Absolutely.
from the community. So like when you go to the airport, like you can press,
Yep.
the happy face, that face, and the frowny face, right? So like thinking about how to do that and to incorporate it into our work and our planning and our strategy.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. One of the things that we've had a lot of internal conversations among the entire team is about how this continues to evolve, because there's a lot of opportunity to be able to really learn, particularly in this new environment, in regards to how people access their information, how they share their information, and the like, and then making sure that it becomes, sorry, I've never had somebody tell me they couldn't hear me. And so just making sure that there's an opportunity for us to be able to engage at a level where there's already diversity of voices that exist, but then also how people want to be engaged. And so that's why we're looking at this very differently in areas where really it's without walls, right? And various communities and being able to meet people where they are.
And then one last thing is sometimes you need ramp-up time for these kinds of things. And if it was quick, we also need to recognize that, that there can be a need to make sure you get the word out and give a long enough runway to collect the information that's needed. That's very important.
Yeah.
So we need to think about that too, Mickey.
Yeah, and I think that was, like, once again, Hope, as you're mentioning, that another piece for, that we were able to learn from as well, because when you think about from October to January 8th, in that window of time, some people were Christmas shopping, some people did Thanksgiving, some people did, and so it's being able to look at that in a way to say, okay, what does it need to look like going forward? And that's why we did the pivot to take place in regards to the online, because we started in the branches having those conversations initially.
I think Hope's point is an extremely important one. How do we communicate across differences and ramp up? I think we also need to look at the intersectionality of literacy rates.
Yes.
And when we do surveys,
Yes.
rather than face-to-face focus groups, we miss that point. So I appreciate the fact that we have a significant literacy rate that we need to look at. And that intersection of literacy and the ability to read surveys, to comprehend what they mean, and being able to do that is an important part of it. It takes that time to do it, and in order for us to do our strategic planning, we're going to have to do that. And I know Mackenzie has been thinking about how do we do that much more effectively. We cannot just look at the data and look at it in silos.
Yes.
We have to look at how does its data pay itself out in different communities. And so I appreciated the fact that we had groups that we benchmarked against, which was a really big deal to have 10 different benchmarks. Those places that we did benchmark, the data is very clear that they're paying attention to different ways that they're communicating with their communities and how they communicate, and they look at the literacy rate.
Yes.
So to make a long story short, how do we better collect data,
Yes.
ramp up to do it sooner rather than later, and then do it in a way that influences our community plans for strategic engagement, and then do it in a way that's not tied to whether or not we do surveys.
Right.
That's boots on the ground. And for
Yes.
community engagement, that's what it requires.
Yeah.
You can't just do it in terms of, and our staff already in each and every branch, do boots on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. We would definitely agree with that, and thank you for bringing it forward.
Well, I have two final points to share with you. I guess I have a point of concern that the 60-plus age group is the star group in this particular situation in terms of utilization, surveys, and all of this. It seems that the old folks like me seem to be more actively involved in responding. I'm hoping that that's only because we think we're smarter than anyone else with those degrees and advanced degrees. We feel like we're not intimidated by the questions because we know we could ask the questions better. So we respond to the little question. I am concerned that we don't have more younger people or younger individuals responding. And this is not about you, this is my concern. And I just hope that we can close that gap in the future. My other point is, I get irritated being an older person that's depending on drugs to survive. I get irritated when I go to the drugstore and I have to go to a procedure before I can get my meds. And they have me to sign this crazy board that makes your writing look like bad, okay? And if you just draw a line across, that's good. Draw a line and they accept that because it's not about the signature, it's about saying you made your mark. We're going back to the X days, make your mark. If they can command that of me to get my meds, it seems like to me in the checkout process for taking out a book, we could have a process that adds 1 or 2 questions that can feed into a continuous kind of feedback that would cut down the number of questions we have to ask when we have a long-term project. Because there are some continuous questions, like your age, something like that. Some people won't fill that in, but most people will. I think we need to look, speaking about technology, we maybe need to look at ways to enhance how we solicit information. And sometimes it's almost mandatory in those situations how you get your stuff. I'm not saying we need to be mean about it, but there are other ways to solicit information. And we maybe need to be a little more, you guys are younger, you don't have to go fight CVS and the rest of those people and say, why must I
Oh, I love the
do
fact that
this?
you're looking over this way, yes.
Well, you and I are on the same team, but younger people over here. But I get irritated about it, but I know why. And I'm just saying there has to be another way for us to have continuous feedback loop that's not so invasive and time consuming at the end. You know what I'm saying?
I was thinking about that, the fact that you don't have a significant feedback from those teenagers. Lawrence has tons of teenagers that come over there after school, tons of them. Warren has lots of teenagers that come in after school. Why aren't we capturing that data with the kind of accuracy, to your point? How do we do that in a way that really gets a lot more feedback from the young people and what they want? And maybe it is drawing the line, I don't know.
Well,
But-
Decatur has a big problem.
Well, she said there was a high school that was over there,
Well,
but they don't,
Decatur is right by Decatur
right next to the
Central,
high school.
and they can't get people. I mean, they got a few kids, but they want more. And so I told her to consider talking to the counselors in the high school or something, getting a connection. But anyway, let me summarize this by saying, Mackenzie, either you were scratching your head or you had something that you just had to say, and I didn't, okay.
She's shaking her
good.
head no.
Well, you have a lot of chances for getting our input going forward, I'm sure.
I will say something to your point of, is the mic picking me up okay? Yeah, okay. So, to your point of constant continuous feedback, actually, getting information at the point of checkout is something that has been discussed beyond this. Mackenzie has been working on that as one of several options for expanded feedback, continuous feedback, targeted feedback. You know, these are mechanisms where we can adjust the questions based on our needs and based on the feedback, so we get more accurate, precise information. And also to another point of not to be so invasive, that is part of the issue with having this be a 10-year thing is it needs to be that invasive to try to get that information. But if we get it on a 1 to 3 to 5 year cycle, then we can have that rolling system of feedback that then again get incorporated into the more one-off, maybe facilities side. So we can look at a better mechanism for that as well.
Okay. Any other, Greg, you have any comments? Anyone? Anybody else? I know you don't have any. I have no comments. Okay, let me go back to what I said a few, 15 minutes ago. Thank you very much for your efforts. This is comprehensive. We have eliminated the excuse of I don't know. Okay, so we appreciate that, and I assure you that Dr. Matata and I are not playing when we say we're in the same club, and we have similar questions. She's just more diplomatic than I am, so I won't bother you with that, but I just feel strongly about this. This is nothing to play with, and I guess I'm still irritated from what the University of Florida did, and I don't want that ever to happen in Indiana. And I don't want it to happen where we are not inclusive, and we're serving everyone, and people shouldn't have to make us do that, because that's the kind of country and operation we should have. So with that, Adam, do you have any closing comments?
Move over. Just a couple. One, thank you to, reiterating the thank you to the team we got together. Schmidt got a great team together. Sure, we paid them, but, it was a lot of good brain power that they found for the money, I believe. So I'm very happy with the report. Overall, there are a few things on our things we could do better list, definitely. Thank you to the Facilities Committee and Chairperson Tribble for taking another Monday night. If anyone, staff, people here, folks at home, have a question about this, please email me. This isn't a one-off, hey, here it is, and it's on your own. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, follow-up, anything like that, please let me know, and I'd be happy to get you any feedback that you request. And
The chair will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Has been moved and second. We're out of here. Thank you.
thank you.